Most hardcore. Some of them talk, but lacking in character. How can I relax when it's theft of innocence? The harmless are broken. Oh, what tragedy to meet death with the lost word unspoken. Hide it behind the foundations. Charity constructed house of euthanasia. Architects of house of cards remain hidden behind one noble cause. Extravagant facade masquerading as God. I don't buy it at all. I like the real thing raw. I tell the whole veil off. The lights on or off. I get mine either way. The stellar man in effect. I'll leave you free and breathless like true psychedelic acceptance. Worldview becomes transcendent. This midnight smoke is so high octane, paralyzing the presence. Hello everyone, and welcome to This Week in Tyranny, the most hardcore news show on earth. Yes, this is your host Conrad Rogas. This is episode 56 of This Week in Tyranny, and it's a special celebratory end of the year episode. It's a end of the year bonanza extravaganza. This is the final episode of the year, and in this episode we will talk about not just what happened this week in tyranny, but what happened this whole year in tyranny, and really since the show began. With that introduction, I'll repeat my website, truthandlaw.com. You can find me on the onegreatworknetwork.com. And we'll go all the way back to episode 1, which is not on YouTube. This Week in Tyranny started second week of December of 2022. So, really, I'm going to go through all of the episodes and just talk about what they were about. So then we could really see the whole year, what happened, and then kind of see a picture form. Really go back, look at the events that occurred, look at what happened this year, and try to really draw some conclusions, not just go, post to post to pillar to post, just looking at all of the new things, the daily, weekly happenings, right? Because this is not the news. It's the analysis, it's the principles that matter here is what I'm trying to do. Really the philosophy. The news gives me an opportunity to talk about that. So let's go through all the data points. Let's go see what happened. Episode 1, of course, I have to tell you it's not on YouTube because they banned me, because they took it off of YouTube because I mentioned the elections, the United States election, and what I thought about that. It was really a passing comment. But the YouTube community guidelines, they have a few things that they really don't like you to talk about. They don't like you to talk about the legitimacy of elections. They don't like you to talk about voting machines. They don't like for you to talk about a certain vaccine, not all of them, but a certain one. And they don't mind when I question the whole practice and its roots, the whole practice of vaccination and its roots in religious superstition, and my whole opposition to it on moral grounds. That's fine. But if you mention a certain word like COVID-19, they don't like that very much, and they shut you down. So I start with that, and I made sure to use all of the keywords and the buzzwords, because as you can tell, I don't care about censorship. I don't care if they take me off of this platform. I just did the episode last week where I talked about YouTube and them wanting facial recognition now. So the gloves are off. The first episode was not only about elections, it was about Indonesia's ultra-authoritarian law, the Iran protester executions, and let's go one thing at a time. The Iran protester executions, there were protesters in Iran following the death of Mahsa Amini. Was a woman that died in custody, who was of course innocent, but because she took off her headdress, she was killed. It's a more nuanced story, but essentially that's what happened. And these protesters who are now trying to protest for more individual rights, they were getting straight up executed. I mean, hey, that's Iran. That's what you get under religious authoritarianism. So I talked about that, and then in this episode, Donald Trump called for the suspension of the Constitution. he actually said that. Of course, slippery slope. China forced to pull back its tyrannical policies. Those were the zero COVID policies, and there was some pushback in Iran, and in China, the pushback was actually successful. China, the mighty Chinese authoritarian government, actually had to pull back some of their policies. So, there was that. Now, episode 2, Twitter Blue brings back subscription-based blue checkmark. I talked about that. The power struggle in Peru kills 20 civilians. And another protester is executed in Iran. And a follow-up on China's zero COVID pullback. These early episodes, I did a lot of really going through all the headlines. Whereas now when I do an episode, kind of like this one, I have a formulated theme. So that was a little bit different. Then the third episode, the $1.7 trillion budget bill slithers its way through Congress as people try to make the best of their holiday season. This is right around Christmas time where I recorded this. So at this time is when they were trying to get that $1.7 trillion budget bill. It's really a euphemism, a budget bill. This is your stolen money going through all these programs. Really, where the money goes to, it's just who lobbied for what. It's like a looters divvying up, and it's their extravaganza and all of their takings of the whole year, and they separate it amongst each other. They kind of battle amongst themselves for the carcass that they basically that they hunted, that in a predatory way that they obtained in the Sahara or the Serengeti. This is essentially what it's like. This is what government does. Episode 4 was the last episode of 2022. That was exactly a year ago, and that's when Illinois' no cash bail policy took effect. We have no cash bail in Illinois. And it was unclear at this point how they would implement it, but now it has become clear. No cash bail does not mean they let you out with an ankle bracelet as a means, as a given. It means you can't get out. It means the cash bail option has been taken away when you get arrested. So you're basically awaiting trial. That means once you get arrested, you get deprived of your freedom. There is no buffer there for you to actually be free until you have to show up for trial. You'll be in there. And when things collapse, you'll be in there indefinitely. This no cash bail thing is a very, very big deal. Much more than I could foresee when I recorded that episode. But I see it now. And I did mention it, very early into these shows. I talked about that and I talked about the pitfalls with that. But what really made it come home is that someone I know recently got it was not only a DUI, it wasn't actually a DUI, it was like registration, tolls, this kind of stuff that they get you for, right? Driving related incidents, registration, license. And they arrested him, and he's over there in the Cook County jail, and he's not going to get out until trial. And who knows when the trial's going to be. Now, this is somebody who's not a dangerous, not a violent offender by any means. Somebody living their life, and all of a sudden, no cash bail, you're not seeing the light of day. Now, and this is still, we're in relative peacetime now. What happens when it goes down? When there's shortages happening? When the government wants to really implement their censorship, implement, whatever controls are coming. I mean, we're not going to assume that controls are only going to stay as tight as they are now. Are we really going to pretend that? Also, in that episode, Secure 2.0 becomes the law. I don't even remember what that was. And Taiwan is used to fuel talk of war with China. As 2022 ends, this year in tyranny is summarized as climate idealists ban the sale of gas-powered cars. The reality is war, inflation, higher prices, and more shortages. I wrote that last year. 2023 will bring more fear and stress, but the courageous prepare for rebellion against the tyrants. Are we? I don't know how many. I shouldn't say that. There are courageous people out there, More and more people doing podcasts, no doubt about that. And that is what happened. 2023 did bring a lot of fear and stress, and the climate, I call them climate idealists then, did it was beginning then, and that is one of the things that I'd say what highlights this year as being a main talking point is the climate. Today was like the first cold day in a while. There's you can definitely feel this holiday season being warmer, and because of what means that is the case, I don't even have to get into. But the point is, they have some good ammunition. The climate agenda people, right? The people pushing the climate agenda have clearly been handed some good bullet points to back up their, erroneous and immoral arguments. Episode 5, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, tightens air quality standards on fine particulate pollution, laying the groundwork for targeting American economic freedom. So that was some regulatory control there. Episode 6, the Illinois assault weapons ban. The Illinois assault weapons ban that I happened to mention last week because it will go into effect now, exactly a year later. A year has passed. This came out then. I made a big deal about it then. And now it did pass. It is going to go into effect in 2 days, actually. So, I called it again, right? These things are coming true because they're... the blueprint is not secret at all. It's not difficult to know these things. Episode 7, the Davos Conference and Cop City. Cop City, the Atlanta Force and the militarization of police. So Cop City is this police training facility where they're practicing a whole lot of urban warfare scenarios, and they're actually doing another one in Chicago, interestingly enough. They're building one as we speak. I should really follow up on that story, what's happening with the Chicago one. Episode 8, mass shootings in Monterey Park and Half Moon Bay and the National Rifle Ban. Now that ban is S25, Senate Bill 25. It's a bill still sitting, awaiting the Senate vote. And it was sponsored by Senator Dianne Feinstein, who died 3 months ago to the day, actually, September 29th. Exactly 3 months. She was a senator for over 30 years. And in 1994, she actually authored the original federal assault weapons ban, a nationwide weapons ban that lasted 10 years. She was the one who brought that in then, and she is the one who brought this in now. And for that, I say good riddance. This person, people like this, deserve no type of sympathy. People say you shouldn't speak ill of the dead. Fuck that. Good. It's a good thing she's gone. Absolutely an improvement for the world that this piece of trash is not breathing any more of the world's air. Because the reason I say it that aggressively is because guns, this is the thing. Last century, all the socialism, all the communism, all the wars, these are the instances in which people lost their guns. And I get that people, especially in this city, and people that are just a bit new and a bit naive, and that haven't really seen evil in this world, they haven't really seen how criminals operate. They don't understand the whole gun thing, why the guns are so crucial. You really don't have a historical context to be able to perceive the danger. You're not getting the guns. If we have to make it the key issue, it is the key issue, because once you disarm this population, once you take their teeth away, take their claws away, that is when these genocides occur over and over again. And I am not somebody who's like a gun nut. I'm not even a gun enthusiast. But what I do get upset about is like, especially the children involved in these holocausts, these genocides, these communist oppressions, these Chinese totalitarian regimes. I have big problems with those, especially because of the women and children that are under that. And I recall very vividly hearing about people, you don't have enough for bread. You have people huddling together in the cold because the government told them that they could not have heating. They have all these shortages. They have food shortages. People are starving when really there's enough to feed everybody. And the only reason that they are in a predicament like that and they can't get out of it is because a certain group of people have a gun and they don't. And that's the whole issue with the guns. And that's why when there's somebody like Dianne Feinstein, I don't even need to know her personally. That's a piece of trash. Good riddance. Get the fuck out of here. And that's how I feel about all of these politicians that are pushing this through. Episode 9, more pieces of trash. Psychopathic police and the murder of Tyre Nichols. I talked about that. I broke down the video. The murder of Tyre Nichols was egregious. I think that like George Floyd and I thought that was atrocious. But Tyre Nichols is one of the worst. Like, I shouldn't even put it on a scale. My condolences go out to him, his family, just thinking about it. Because that shit was disgusting. And those are some more pieces of trash. I talked about them. I titled it Nothing Worse Than a House Slave. And that's what it is. A lot of people got mad at me because I used the word house slave to talk about black people because those were black cops doing that to him. But it's not a racial thing. But I say house slave for a reason because that's what they are. They're house slaves. So if somebody has a problem with that, I have a problem with you not taking slavery as seriously as I do, because I take it seriously. So I'm the one who should be offended, not you. These people who get all sensitive that I'm outside of their race, talking about the issues in the community. Episode 10, the State of the Union Address. I addressed Biden addressing the nation. I talked about how the State of the Union Address is all bullshit every year. Just they have like 3 or 4 families. They talk about how good their military is doing, how good their economic policy is. It's just a joke. After you've seen like 2 or 3 of them, I don't understand how people can even stomach this. It was bullshit when Trump did it. It was bullshit when Biden did it. Trump was only slightly better. He still almost made you want to throw up with the generalities. So I really didn't think this was going to be a rant episode. This wasn't supposed to be an angry episode. But hey, it's a little bit late. I'm just going to tell it how it is. And this is how this year has been. It's all coming back to me now. It's like I'm reliving the year. Episode 11, exoteric and esoteric aspects of the Chinese surveillance balloon event and other recent high-altitude object incidents. This is when there was the big Chinese balloon, the picture over Montana, I believe. There was big fear around China. And then I talked about exoteric and esoteric. I talked about some of the occult symbolism there. Episode 12, Joe Biden and Andrzej Duda, the former Polish president. I think he still might be in office. He'll be out of there soon. They addressed the world in Warsaw, invoking the Warsaw Uprising and solidarity, the underground movement against communism in the 70s and 80s. They invoked that in an attempt to garner support for the proxy war with Russia in Ukraine, for the war in Ukraine. Which is, I don't know if I can convey this, it's especially disgusting that you have this Polish president who is a completely weasel, and he's just another soft punk, really. Yeah, I won't fully call him a piece of trash because he's not in the same category as people who try to take the guns away and people who abuse and kill people to death as they scream for their mother. They're not on that level. But he's definitely one of these punks out here, the Polish president. And they're invoking the biggest heroes that I could conceive of, people who are fighting against the Nazis and communists. For what? For not any kind of resistance against government, for aid to Ukraine to fight that whole proxy war, which is a mess. And I've said long ago what I believe, what I think is the correct action for people in Ukraine. Let the Russians in, let them take over. And you'll still have the same situation. You'll still have the same slavery. Don't forget that wars are with tyrants against tyrants, governments against governments, not civilians. Take the uniforms off. There is no motherland. There is no fatherland. There's only your land, your home, your family. Take the uniforms off. Take your guns home where they're needed. And if they do want to impose something, if they want to cross the line and they want to impose some tyranny on you, you'll be much more effective fighting guerrilla warfare with those guns, and you will break them. Rather than being cannon fodder to go fight on the front lines and die in the human sacrifice ritual called war. Simple. Episode 13, Havana Syndrome. I talked about Havana Syndrome, targeted individuals, and secret military technology. What they call gang stalking, and I talked about Havana Syndrome, which is kind of a new incarnation of that, a bit recent, but it's something that actually got mainstream media attention. It's another thing that will get you, talking about that will definitely get you shadow banned or blacklisted, if not outright censored. Episode 14, Biden's proposed budget. I won't go into that. Episode 15, banks collapse, drones collide, and the slaves still love their servitude. So that was about the Silicon Valley Bank collapsing. Since then, you've had FTX with Sam Bankman-Fried. Really, with these banks collapsing, it's a similar, I see a parallel with that, and the crypto exchanges going down. The reason they're having these things occur is because they actually want more uncertainty with money right now to drive further regulation in the future. They want crypto to be uncertain. They want even these investment banks they want there to be a level of uncertainty, because this is the time of shaky ground. The gas prices might go down a little bit, then they'll shoot up. They're working on people's anxiety because the next few years, remember, it's Agenda 2030, right? So we're getting there close. So we're going to have something akin to an economic downturn or crash, although I don't think it'll be a major one. But they need to play on that anxiety to justify controls when the time is for controls. I'm talking about full financial regulation and another step towards outlawing cash. That's the plan. And then the drones colliding was about the Russian jet crashing into the US drone, which you see the video of that, and that's another ridiculous, childish, boyish move. You know, just militaries flexing on each other to scare both of their populations. It's the Cold War all over again. Same thing with China and Taiwan. All of these, all of these threats of global war, these threats of conflict, and it's Russia again being a significant player when really they haven't been since what? Since the 70s? Right, and all of a sudden they're this big danger. They're the new terrorists. And you see this jet crashed with the drone. Meaning what? What does that mean for us? It means nothing. Same thing, like they want you to fear nuclear war and all this stuff. It's a non-issue. The issue is on a daily basis, you got people shooting your kids up intravenously with thimerosal, aluminum, all the adjuvants, all the mercury, all the things that are in these shots, right? That's what we're talking about here. You got that on a daily basis. You got the things they're teaching them in schools, and you got straight up criminals taking your money in the meantime through taxation. I talked about the drones, the Reaper drones. I talked about them as the Faustian pentagram. They resemble actually a upside down pentagram. I talked about the meaning of that. 16, school shooting in Denver, protests in Paris. 17, Donald Trump becomes the first former U.S. president to face criminal charges. He's actually the first to face criminal charges. Now, he's been taken off one of the state ballots as the re-election is less than a year away now. The campaigns have already begun. There's all this drama about Donald Trump, and I see it as more friction. I see it as more dialectic, really dialectic agitation, because a certain percentage of these people are going to see Donald Trump as a martyr when 4 years have already shown you he's completely inept. I always say this: what did he actually say with the microphone in front of his mouth? He said much less than I have said in these 30 minutes or however long this show is. Why don't people talk like this? Because they're not really about it. They're not really real. They're not real in the sense that they're not genuine and that they're not powerful enough, or they have some kind of limitations imposed, whether by themselves or imposed from the outside. They have party limits that they're not going to cross, so there's not going to be any real change done. And really, the lesser of two evils is still a misstep. It's a progression towards evil, and it can never be good. So don't vote for this guy. Don't worry about what's happening to him. Is it an injustice that he's going to jail? If he is, yes, it's a total witch hunt. The character assassination and witch hunt on Donald Trump is a huge injustice. And the only reason it really flies is because people have this subliminal but ever-present, pervasive, persistent hatred of the rich. And I think it's one of the most disgusting things. People hate the rich, even in America. You hate the rich. It's a mind control technique, because you're hating somebody not for being corrupt. They hate these people because they have something that everybody wishes they had, and they're gonna tear them down. It's crabs in a barrel mentality. But of course, half this nation or more celebrating that he is being made an example out of, right? Because they don't think Donald Trump deserves to have all the wealth and fame that he has, and they think they do. But what do they do with it? What do people do with their life, you know? Episode 18, Attorney General's report on child sexual abuse in the Archdiocese of Baltimore. I don't even know that. See, I'm not being a very good Catholic right now. Basically, the church jurisdiction of Baltimore. There came out an Attorney General's report about sexual abuse. Now, sexual abuse in the Catholic Church, nothing new, right? At the same time, though, there's all this anti-church sentiment, which is also dialectic agitation, because with the church, they're really trying to take down any sense of decorum or morality, any sense of togetherness, any sense of dignity, more so of like a cultural dignity, right? Then you had the Tennessee Three, which is some liberal agitators who happen to be right. I won't go into that. Episode 19, Robot Dog joins the New York police. Then Elon Musk labeled the government-funded media on Twitter. I always get a kick out of that. I enjoyed that. He actually put, by the BBC, he put that they were government-funded media, which is true. And BBC made a whole thing about it, that they're not, that they're funded by I don't know if they said it was citizen funding or private funding, but what it is a franchise fee that every household in England has to pay. It's actually much worse than I even thought. It's worse than government funded, because that makes you think, oh, they're getting some kind of some type of tax grant or funding is going that way. But it's actually a franchise fee that every household has to pay, whether or not they watch the channel. It's like a royal tribute. So very good that Elon Musk did that. Also in that episode, Joe Biden introduced the strictest ever vehicle emissions limits. Strictest ever. That's a big deal. And remember that one of the earlier episodes was about the EPA increasing their fine particulate pollution limits. A continuation of the environmental climate agenda, as well as the political agitation. Episode 21, the Washington assault weapons ban. There was a ban in Washington. I'm not sure if it was a mass shooting or which one caused that. But as a follow-up on that, on September 1st, a court upheld that law for the third time. So just like the Illinois one that I mentioned, it's here to stay. Everybody said, oh, these courts will say it's unconstitutional, it'll never stick. It's stuck. It's here. I was right about that. You should never assume that a government action won't work, or that they will not carry it to the end, that they will not push it to its completion. They will. That's what they do. Episode 22, Florida transgender bills. I talked about how the new right wing is really full of shit as well. They're going to focus on the who goes into the bathroom. They're going to focus on really abortion, which is a super controversial issue, but it's not a main one. It's not one of the big things we have to worry about here. The main problems are who's printing our money. Can we keep what we make? Do we own our house? Do we own our car? Can somebody shut off our food, water, shelter? Can somebody restrict our freedom to move? These are the important things. What kind of a future will my child have? Right? These are the important things. Next, episode 23 was about shocking violence and abuse. I talked about the gore videos that were surfacing around that time. This is another aspect that people don't get into, and I think this is part of the reason people are so naive and too innocent for the world. Because you can find these videos of what people really do each other, of how people actually treat each other, the violence they do to each other. And that really puts my whole gun rant into context as well. Because when you don't have a gun, these are some of the things that people will do to you. People who are weaker than you, they're weaker than you. They should not exercise any power over you. Really, they wouldn't. But they get up and get in packs together, and because they resort to force and they have weapons and you don't, because they're willing to take the risk of going to jail or whatever, these cartels in Mexico and South America, because they're willing to do that because they don't value their life. They can be the type to flail you, set you on fire, and you end up in one of these gore mixtapes. And that's the facts. Episode 24, Montana TikTok ban. Montana banned TikTok. I talked about how that's another example of these right wingers, emptying the whole clip and then not hitting the target. Emptying the whole magazine and not hitting the target. Because you ban TikTok, so what? You're banning stuff. You're banning information. You're not putting the information out there of what people really need to know. And all these conservatives, where is your morality? Where is your manifesto? Because I'll tell you mine. It's objective reality. It's from logic first, arriving at the objective conclusion that no one has the right to initiate force on another person simply because I own myself, because I am present in my consciousness. Therefore, I have the right to my own body. I have the right to exercise my free will. And the only rights that do not exist are the ones that infringe on somebody else's property. That's a good start, right? Then I could go into the heroic vision of man, the only type of imposition, the moral imposition that can be made is really by your own judgment, and you are responsible only to answer for the consequences of your own actions. Things like that, right? Nobody's going to say anything like that. They're going to fall back on religion. They're going to fall back on the common good. And it's always going to be eternally shifting. Because these guys don't stand on principles. Episode 25, Stewart Rhodes sentenced to 18 years in prison. So this is one of these January 6th guys. Sedition and treason on January 6th. People think that's crazy. It's a bit shocking to see 30 years for somebody who's, basically a normal guy. But that's what happens when you oppose the government. And that's why I said I never support half measures. Because what they did on January 6th was half measures. If you're going to a government building and you're going to take it over, you better be prepared to take some action. Some real action. Not just take some pictures and dance and pose. Take some real action. So I support full measures. I don't support half measures. 27, Vinny Eastwood's fight against wrongful arrest and conviction. I talked about Vinny Eastwood's whole thing. It was during his lockdown. He was protesting a lockdown that he was wrongfully in prison and put in solitary confinement and really treated horribly. But he was recently freed, actually, so he outlasted that thing after thousands and thousands of dollars and really years of anxiety, uncertainty, and suffering. 28, interest rates, economic polarity, and the occult origins of money. 29, the FDA approves cultivated meat. I'd group that together with the environmental agenda, with the Agenda 21, the sustainable development, with the climate change agenda. FDA approves cultivated meat. Episode 30 was the 4th of July special. That was about the wildfire smoke. That was when all the smoke from the wildfires was sweeping across the land. Another thing that you could link to geoengineering, right? So this is another climate related thing. Episode 31, global heating, continuation of that. That was what was quoted the hottest week in history. It was the hottest week in history, and it's not that it was 120 degrees anywhere, it was just the highest average. This is also why this will be called one of the hottest Christmases, the hottest Decembers. It's not that there's any sweltering heat anywhere. And El Nino is mentioned as a factor for this, but only in a passing only in a passing way. But really, this may have a big impact on why everything is a bit more mild and just a bit warmer. But geoengineering is another explanation. We don't actually know, but they try to give causality without actually having any of the indicators of causality or having any way to separate the variables and make sense. What is black, what is white, what is up, and what is down. We don't have that, so they just are going to call it the hottest week in history. Because who's going to tell them it isn't? That was about environmental tyranny and coercion. Episode 32, the CDC endorsed breastfeeding for biological males. It was called chest feeding. That was quite a disturbing episode, and that one's kind of self-explanatory. Episode 33 was the country music backlash after the Jason Aldean Try That in a Small Town video. I talked about more racial dialectics, slavery in Italy, communist activism in Scotland. It was basically about racial and cultural division, not just racial, but also class division, as with the Marxist propaganda. Episode 34 was about Vinnie Eastwood's appeal. I revisited that. 35, the incandescent light bulb ban. There are no more incandescent light bulbs being sold because they're less efficient, and LED is the new thing. But LED, yes, it is more efficient. It is better technology, but it is a different light. So this isn't apples to apples. And I have a big problem with this light bulb stuff. I remember I lost my cool in that episode too. Because here's the thing. Government really needs to get the hell out of my bedroom. Because if something is truly an inferior technology, the market decides. The market decides. You don't ban it. And the incandescent light bulb is not dangerous. It doesn't hurt anybody, right? The reason we don't use kerosene lamps is because we have no use for it. There has been something that replaced it. Now, once there's something that replaces the incandescent light bulb, that gives warm yellow light, right, which affects the brain, the mind, a person's well-being in a different way than these aggressive LEDs that I use for my show. They're much different now. What makes technology obsolete? Is it government decree or is it user choice due to efficacy, due to the efficiency of a new technology? Nobody had to tell you to stop using horseback. It's because the car was a superior technology and nobody had to outlaw something like that, right? But they will now because this is a more climate agenda. Episode 36, the WHO's pandemic treaty. You've heard a lot about that. I finally did an episode about that. Episode 37, the Hawaii wildfires. Talked about some geoengineering as well that could be involved in that. Episode 38, the Fukushima water released into the ocean. So more than 10 years, I believe, after the Fukushima spill, a nuclear meltdown, that water was released into the ocean. So I talked about nuclear energy. I talked about nuclear energy and the whole idea of clean energy and the problem with splitting atoms, actually. Then episode 39, the Digital Services Act, which is a super tyrannical internet bill in the European Union that essentially makes it possible for not only your website, your domain, whoever's selling your domain, whoever's hosting your website, whoever's hosting a board, whoever's giving you the internet for you to post can be sued and held responsible if you are maybe sharing some dangerous information or some illegal information or harmful information. Of course, it's arbitrary what they deem to be that harmful information. But they have that Digital Services Act to basically put a lock and key on free exchange of information in the European Union. It's another big deal, that episode. Episode 40, Wild to Mild. That was the CDC's seasonal flu vaccination campaign. And these people that are making the advertisements with the little giraffe and the cute little cat to get kids and their moms to take these flu vaccines, you are pieces of trash. You are huge pieces of trash, every bit as much as those people that killed Tyree Nichols, who tortured him to death on the street a few blocks from his house. Same pieces of trash. You advertisers who are making those images, trying to emotionally manipulate pregnant women to get vaccinated, to get their newborns vaccinated for the seasonal flu. That's some bullshit right there. That shit grinds my gears right there, no doubt. Episode 41, Governor Josh Green addressed the Hawaii wildfires, so that was a follow-up. Shout out to Peggy Hall, who gave me the inspiration for that video. I saw another one of her videos today, actually. She talked about, in California, they got straight toilet water, they got sewer water, and they're going to convert it to tap water. And they've basically cleared the path for municipalities to be able to do that. Really, from the sewer straight to treat that. If you believe in their procedures and how their dedication to their procedures to drink that water. Bill Gates tried a glass of it and he said it tastes delicious. So, take that take that however you want. Episode 42 was the Tyranny of Tomorrow. That was because of all these events were being anticipated on September 23rd. And with the absence of really any stories that were compelling that week, I talked about the tyranny of anticipating a big crash, a big collapse. I already talked about it in this episode. This is another one of these mind control techniques. It will keep us from actually being proactive and forward thinking and actually creating a change, not worrying about some change that might happen tomorrow. It's about making the change today. That's how the people do it who are ruling our dumbasses. Episode 43 was the shooting of Eddie Irizarry, and then the protests and looting that followed. I called that episode the Communist Labyrinth, because that's how it goes. You got a police-involved shooting, obviously causes outrage, but then you have the protesters and the looters and the provocateurs that, of course, discredit anybody who's against police. So you got both sides really are going to result in more statism, more control. Episode 44, the Biden administration resumes the border wall, and I talked about what would later be called the Israel-Palestine War. And episode 45 was that Israel War Part 1 breakdown. That one was about atrocity propaganda. I talked about how throughout history, you get all these stories of atrocities of people cutting babies' heads off, these really extreme stuff. And it's all to get people to go to war with those people, emotionally manipulate them. And it works time and time again. It's how we got into Iraq originally with Desert Storm. It's how the United States got into World War I. Atrocity propaganda over and over again. I talked about that. Then episode 46 was a break from my Israel-Palestine series, where I did a show from Exton, Pennsylvania. I attended the Two Masks Same Face presentations, the dark occult origins of Nazism and communism. That's when I was at Mark Passio's presentation. And really, I just kind of I freestyled that one, talked about what was on my mind, talked a bit about some of my personal trials, how I really saw freedom, and how I saw the vision of life and what men should be doing, because I was definitely inspired by being around people who are speaking up. Definitely not around cowards that day. Definitely not around pieces of trash that weekend. So I did that. Then episode 47 the next week was my Israel War Part 2. It was really the conclusion of my Israel-Palestine episodes, where I broke down the war and I talked about the history of false flags. Episode 48, Infiltration and Fracturing of the Freedom Network. This is about calls for censorship. This is about people like Ben Shapiro, talking about people who are saying anything that is allegedly, or in his, I guess, estimate, supporting Hamas, then that person should be censored, that person should be banned. These are all the people that were free speech absolutists, and now they want to ban somebody because you've got an issue that tugs on their emotional heartstrings, and you see their principles have been abandoned. All these people abandoned their principles. Episode 49, Second Wave Neo-Nazism. And it seems like I mentioned it for the 5th, 6th time in this episode. It's this new right wing. It's brewing into something that is pro-religion, that is pro-white race, that is this kind of nationalistic, patriotic thing. Back the blue, back the military. It's second wave neo-Nazism. It's going to be the Nazi Party all over again. Episode 50, Debunking Collectivist Pseudoscience. That's one of my personal favorites, one of the episodes, probably the episode I'm most proud of. I talked about climate change attribution, a thing that I still think people aren't onto that. I haven't really brought it into, I haven't managed to make that as popular as it should be, but you'll hear more about it. Climate change attribution, it's their pseudoscience that they're going to put forward to claim that humans cause A, B, and C. So I talked about the conditions that you need to satisfy if you want to prove causality. You need to prove that A happened before B. You need to prove that there can be no coincidence or randomness that could account for it. And also the main one, the big one that they can never satisfy, is that you need to prove that there are no other variables that could be affecting the outcome. And how are you going to isolate all the variables where to talk about if humans cause an increase in Earth's temperature? You would need all the variables. You would need the variables of what's in the San Pellegrino water. They'll never get it. So this is pseudoscience. And that's what climate attribution is. It's assumptions. They get some scientific data and then they run computer models with it, like Mr. Neil Ferguson with his bullshit computer models during the pandemic. And I talked about that in that episode. Episode 51 was Love and Will, the Divine Romance. I had to do that for episode 51 because of the significance of that number. I won't really go into details about that because honestly I don't remember. And it's been a hectic last month, I'd say. I'm looking at these episodes now and I see it. So, and the next episode was 52, How to Confront Tyranny, an Ice Cold Perspective. And episode 52 was a real rough week for me. So I freestyled that one as well. Didn't have any news that week. I kind of just had to rant a bit. And that was what it was. Then episode 53 was about New York's forced quarantine law. And they do have that. Shout out to Hrvoje Morić. I was on his show on TNT Radio, and he brought this up to me that New York has a law when they could legally put you in concentration camps. And yes, this is in the New York law. It is a law that you could be forcibly quarantined, taken out of your house, and put into what they call interim housing, which means a camp. Episode 54 was the Dubai Climate Summit, or the COP28, the Conference of the Parties of the United Nations Framework on Climate Change. It's so recent, I won't really go into that. You should watch the last episode 2 weeks ago, because that was another circus. Episode 55, last week's episode, was YouTube requiring facial verification for creator features. I will not be able to make anything clickable in my description because I would have to record a video. They want a video of my face looking into my phone camera for 30 seconds. Now that's degrading. That's degrading. I'll stop short of calling that person a piece of trash. I also talked about in that episode the Prague shooting. I talked about the symbolism there. I talked about the history of it. I talked about the history of Czech gun ownership. It's another historically significant episode, I feel like. So I'd say with the last episode, I've gotten out of that little bit of a funk I was in. And that was This Year in Tyranny. A lot of it. I anticipated in doing like a summary or like a moving forward to next year, but going through those individually, I think I've done it in real time. But what reoccurred again and again and again is this climate thing, and this is indeed the new thing. The pandemic came and it served a purpose. It definitely shook up the world a lot. It restricted our right to travel. It totally turned family member against family member. It created a lot of dangerous precedents. But the next thing is climate change. And you see how warm it is this Christmas. These are now tangible things. They're moving to climate change because it's having even a bigger tangible effect than the pandemic did. It's actually a more visceral response where you're going to see, if this year it's the summer and you start to see 110 degrees, your principles, your fortitude is going to be tested. You need to stand on your principles then, because they're going to say it's your gas car, it's your diesel truck, it's your gas stove, it's your water use, it's all these things that are making the extreme weather conditions happen, when in reality your first diagnosis, your first suspicion should be government interference and geoengineering. You should expect a false flag, just like when one of these terror events happen or these mass killings happen. And that's just the way it is. Government doesn't get the innocent until proven guilty defense, because they're not innocent. They've been convicted over and over again. This is one thing I wanted to mention. I had a few episodes talking about everybody anticipating a collapse and not being proactive, not being forward thinking, not being productive and really courageous in changing the way our individual rights and freedoms are totally slipping. They're cutting the floor out from under us. Now, my point with that is, this is the 21st century. Now, this 21st century was supposed to be a time of freedom. It's supposed to be a time of enlightenment and liberty. The 20th century, the 1900s, were a time of socialism, slavery, and genocide. It was the worst. So many people died. The Nazis, the communists, Mao with China, the starving, the hunger, everything that happened. The Depression, also before the wars, World War I, and then the Great Depression, all this happened. This was a time of mass suffering, but the century before that was the Industrial Revolution. The 19th century was has to be the most glorious century in human history. You actually had the free market spread all throughout the world with the Industrial Revolution. This is the thing that really did. This is the thing that made life so much better. This is when life expectancy started to go up. This is what created the modern scientists and men of medicine. This is what makes all of this possible. And then we've had a big rebound. We've had a total dark 100 years of total darkness, and that was the last century. Here, we're supposed to be heading into a new golden age. But we're not, because we're worried about nuclear war, we're worried about the dollar collapsing, we're worried about all these things. Meanwhile, there are not enough people standing in principles and marching forward, knowing what's going on and not being afraid, knowing what to tell their family and kids, and their friends and people at home. You have to know what's going on here, right? This is what This Week in Tyranny is for. If you don't know something, you can be intimidated by the prospect of uncertainty. This is what they get us with on the news. They play on our emotions. I could give you this whole list of things and it could sound pretty scary. But you see these key things, these key agendas. The climate agenda, that's a key agenda. The political reshuffling into having a more extremist, a more fundamental right wing now, and therefore a more reciprocally extremist left wing, a more radicalized left wing. You've got that kind of polarization domestically. With the whole climate thing, it doesn't matter who's going to win the next election. People are going to are talking about what's going to happen with the election. It doesn't matter what's going to happen with the election. What are you doing to change the world? You. What system are you putting forward? And I think that's good enough to leave it there. And that was This Year in Tyranny. And a Happy New Year to you. And I'll be back here next week, calling some people pieces of trash if that needs to be the case. So once again, thank you very much. Thank you to all my viewers. Thank you to everybody who's emailed me, who stays in touch with me, who, if there's some, I've been busy as well lately, so I know I'm not as accessible as I used to be, but I really appreciate you. I don't say that enough. I might as well say it here in the spirit of the holidays. Thank you so much. Thank you for being who you are. And just know that I'm not looking down on any of you. But I do want to lead the charge here. I expect to live my life like a hero, and I think many of you guys should do the same. So, thank you very much. See you next week on This Week in Tyranny.